Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Adam Breckler with us. Adam, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, no problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our talk. I'm a visual guy, and you work for a company called Visually. You're actually the VP of product there. And you have some other startups under your belt, too, that you've worked at and started, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But tell us about Visually a little bit. What is Visually?
Sure. So Visually, we're the world's largest community and marketplace for information design. People come to our site to browse informative and beautiful visualization content, and then once they have something that they want to get created, they come to our marketplace and work with one of our designers in order to make their infographics come into place.
Gotcha. So is it like an infographic marketplace? Is that the best way to kind of sum it up?
It is, yeah. We're touching on infographics in the static form. Recently, we've gotten into more motion graphics and data visualizations and reports and presentations. So it's a little broader than that, but that's kind of our core.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then from looking at the site, it looks like there's kind of this like public viewing area where you go to it and you're just looking through infographics, maybe getting inspired, learning, whatever. And then there's also like this marketplace side next to it where you can, buy or create depending on what side of the equation you're on. Does that kind of sum up the product right now?
Yeah, it does. So the product, it starts at the website level, and that's where we see about 80,000 visitors come through every day just looking and browsing the graphics. And that's
Wow.
kind of the top of the funnel for us in a marketing sense. So we get a lot of traffic there. That was the original product in and of itself that we launched with a few years ago. And so we had the website. We were able to grow a pretty strong and sizable community based on designers submitting their own work in order to get attention and distribution and recognition for it. And then from that, back in October of the past year, we decided to kind of make the transition to more of a commerce focus and building a marketplace platform where the designers that were already submitting their work could now take on projects that clients were looking to have created.
Okay, see, I thought the stuff I was viewing was actually a part of the marketplace. So
No.
it's kind of a cool growth hack because, we know infographics get a lot of traffic. So if you're the platform where people are uploading their infographics, I mean, it makes sense why you guys have almost 100K people coming through a day. That's quite a bit of traffic, but it's because infographics are really popular, right?
It is, yeah. And, sometimes people have that misperception, and it can be in our favor. We try to not, assume that people think that we created all of the work because we didn't. It's, our community of designers, and we give them attribution and everything. But we do call out when there are graphics that were created in the marketplace. Usually you'll see designed by Visually, or it'll have our Visually logo on the graphic itself.
Yeah, no, the stuff I've seen where the Visually logo's on it is beautiful, and the normal stuff is beautiful. So it's not like there's a huge difference between the two or anything. How long have you said you've been working on the marketplace? Just since last year?
Yeah, so the marketplace officially launched in October of 2012.
Okay, so what are you guys doing there in terms of growing the different sides of the marketplace? How are you, acquiring artists? How are you acquiring people that need artists? What are some of the things going into that engine?
Sure. So, like I said, at the top of the funnel, we have all the graphics on the site that people are coming to and browsing. And what we found is that our best kind of form of marketing for the marketplace is creating really killer visualizations and infographics within our marketplace. So we'll actually go and work with some of the designers who are working on client projects, and then tap them to work on marketing graphics for us. So say we have some topic that's topical or in the news, and we think we could put out something really compelling around it. We'll work with some of our marketplace designers to crank something out really quick, and then use that for our own marketing.
Gotcha. So you're using your own product to market your product,
Yeah.
which is awesome. That's great, and it's
Yeah.
a good kind of testimonial that you believe in what you've created when you're tapping into your own marketplace. You're not going to some other source to get your infographics to grow your company. So that's
Yeah.
cool. Do you find that a lot of people consume a lot of these kind of free looking at other people's infographics before they end up buying? Do you have the metrics to kind of be like, look, on average, they look at 50 infographics before they pull the trigger and buy their own?
Yeah, so it's hard to say on average, but what we see is that there's two typical kind of potential customers, and one of them maybe they'll come in through a really high intent kind of keyword query through Google. They'll be looking for create infographics or buy infographics, and these people already have really high intent, and they'll just kind of follow the path on the site all the way through to the marketplace and sign up and contact us. The other class of visitors, which is that really large, in terms of volume, percentage of visitors to the website every day, they might need some convincing. So, they're browsing lots of infographics. They may not even be in the market to buy one. In fact, they probably aren't. So, just kind of getting on their radar with ongoing content, whether it's through our Facebook feed, through our Twitter feed, through our email newsletter. We're just constantly pushing out content. And so when it comes time for them where they actually have a need and they're ready to pay to create an infographic, will be top of mind. And then we also have these free tools we developed, which you mentioned are the Visually Create tools. And these are kind of demonstrations of our technology that we've built to allow people to create infographics with the click of a button. So they're essentially templates that you can use, plug in your Twitter, plug in your Facebook page data, and then you'll be able to pop out an infographic.
Yeah, I actually played with the infographic creation tools. I think it was a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and it was before I even knew you were going to be coming on the show or that we had any conversation with Visually. And I was the guy that did the Google search, created an infographic. I ended up in your marketplace. I played with the free tools because I just want to see what options are out there. Because I guess before I would have just went to Odesk. It's kind of okay, let me just find somebody. But that's not fun or easy because I have to vet them, I have to find a price point I like, I have to look at their portfolio and make all the decisions myself. Where you guys have really created a marketplace where a lot of those things are already done for me. I just show up, pay for it, and get what I need, or create it myself. Either way, so I like what you guys are doing there. Have you guys ever had a problem growing one side of the marketplace too quickly? So you got too many people wanting an infographic and not enough artists. Too many artists and there's not enough people wanting them, and so they're getting bummed out. They're not getting enough leads. Anything there?
Sure. So when we started out, we were kind of in the fortunate position that we had the supply side of the market in terms of the designers already on the platform. So they had come to us initially to promote their work, and then they had accounts, and so they were familiar with us. We were familiar with them, and then once we decided to bolt on the marketplace service, then we already had, I think, around 200 designers that we then went and certified to work on projects from day one. Okay. So we had a good kind of head start on the supply, so that was never really an issue. Mm-hmm. That being said, we hit our first kind of supply crunch a few months back when we had a spike in demand for projects, but then we've since kind of expanded out the number of designers that we've been certifying, and so mm-hmm. We're a marketplace it's not a free for all of a marketplace like an Odesk or Elance. Like it's more of a curated approach that we've taken where there's tens of thousands of designers you could go and find through our site who submit infographics, but then we only select the top 5% or so of those to actually work with customers.
Yeah, it makes sense. You talk about the supply and demand problem that you guys hit a couple months ago. At least the problem was on the right side of the equation. Yeah. It's good that you have too much demand and you have to find people to create the infographics, as opposed to no one needs them, because then you don't have either side of the market.
Right. I think that was it was definitely intentional. Like we always knew we had to kind of try to grow supply first. So if there's anything to take away from that, it's just that I think biasing towards really focusing on supply before you try to generate more demand is probably a good way to go in most cases.
That's a great insight. What do you guys release in terms of numbers to show your growth? I know you've already mentioned 80,000 visitors a day. That's a huge one. Anything else? I mean, you probably can't disclose revenues and things like that, but number of infographics made, number of jobs requested. I don't know, just anything like that at all?
Sure, yeah. No, we've had over 500 kind of projects that have gone through the platform. Some of those are for multiple infographics. We had one customer the other day that wanted 18 infographics. Wow. They wanted to create one for each press release they were putting out over a few months span. And so, those projects, they range from just a static infographic to a motion graphic to a more like interactive or dashboard like presentation. So kind of runs the gamut there.
Yeah, and as you guys think about your metrics, what are your all's KPIs? What are the key numbers that you're probably getting emailed every day, or you're looking at them once a week at least? What are the numbers when you're like, all right, these matter? And talk to us a little bit about that, because it's always fun to get inside of someone else's head who has a different kind of business.
Sure. So we track everything and visually. We're sending out weekly reports on kind of the top metrics in each department. So on the sales side, we're tracking number of prospects that come through the site. So those are people that have submitted a contact form, expressed some intent to work on a project through the marketplace. Number of leads, which are people basically who have converted from a prospect to an actual conversation with the salesperson. Number of project starts we're tracking, so how many projects are started this week versus last week versus the previous period. And for all these metrics, we're tracking week over week growth and like month over month growth. So we're not focused on the absolute number, more on the growth rate. So we're targeting higher growth rates instead of just trying to hit numbers typically. And then on the marketing side, we have visits to the website, the top of the funnel, then emails captured. That's kind of our primary way of doing lead generation, is capturing emails either through a sign up, like someone like yourself who signed up to use one of the templates. Maybe you left your email for a free infographic template or a white paper. And then all the way down to number of emails sent, number of responses, and tracking growth rates on all of it.
How important is it for you guys to have those kind of numbers and be able to see the week over week and month over month growth percentages? Is that just like fun, or is it like really, really important?
For us, I think it's really critical because we have a really wide funnel, so we have we have to see how each metric interrelates to each other, because we can throw a bunch of traffic and get a bunch of graphics out and get a lot of traffic to the site, but that's at the very top of the funnel. So seeing how those metrics impact all the other ones downstream for us is really critical to understand what's actually driving sales.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now you're the VP of product there, which basically means you obsess about the product all day long, right? You're thinking about features, you're thinking about how it works, the experience of it, the roadmap, all that kind of stuff. Are there any ways that you've tried to use the product itself to grow the product? And you kind of already mentioned one where you use the marketplace to buy infographics that are then going to be, help you promote it. But anything maybe even more integral to the product to help spread it?
Yeah, so in our case, we have somewhat of an indirect kind of path towards growing the product. Since it is, like, the product itself, when you're talking about the marketplace, it's a project management platform, and people will invite their colleagues that are working on projects together, and that'll kind of help get some distribution. But it's not really a viral product in the sense of most consumer-facing things.
Yeah.
So our biggest engine of growth is really our website as the product, because that's where people first get in contact with us. So when we're using, when we're talking about the marketplace product, we're using that to generate content that then is going to get distribution through our website and our other channels.
Yeah.
So I could give you one example of a graphic that we created in the marketplace.
That'd be awesome.
That was really successful. So this was about a year ago. We created a graphic. It's called "What Are the Odds?" You can look it up. Just do Google search. Basically, it's a fun graphic about what are the odds of you existing as you today. So what are the odds that going all the way back in time, back to your parents meeting their parents, all the way back to the Big Bang. So it's not the most like scientific or factual graphic, but and it sparked a really interesting debate between atheists and people that were more religious, which I think was part of its success. But in any case, it generated 1.7 million views to our website, or visits directly to the graphic, which resulted in a bunch of accounts created and emails and business down the road. And it got pickup on Boing Boing and all over, got blown up over the web. I think it got like 10 million views on external sites. And this was a graphic that I literally put together in a few days with a designer in a marketplace. So I had an idea one day in the shower, what are the odds of me existing? It was a very existential moment.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if we could visualize this somehow, but I needed to try to put together the math behind it.
Uh-huh.
I realized it was kind of going to be a really arduous process. So I just started poking around Google and found that some professor at Harvard had already put together the numbers. So he had all the math laid out. So we just took that math with his permission and basically put it into a really nicely designed story in the form of an infographic. And just that kind of few hours of effort really paid a lot of dividends. And that was just an example of us kind of using the product, using our platform in order to market the
Yeah.
product.
Well, that actually segues perfectly into what I want to talk about, which is how companies can use infographics to grow their own product. Because they may not be a marketplace for infographics, but infographics work beyond that. Infographics are powerful tools. Like you said, you had over 1 million people come to the site because of it. And if your site had been something else, you probably would have still had 1 million something people come to your site because of it. But let's start with that. Do you think infographics are a really powerful way to grow a product?
I think they are. I think there's a caveat there, which people often maybe overlook, which is that they're really good. They can be very good for direct kind of customer acquisition, but they're even better for kind of thought leadership and branding, and more of being viewed as a branding and an advertising exercise versus direct customer acquisition. Oftentimes customers will they'll put out an infographic and it won't have a huge success. Maybe people come to their site but they won't convert. But what it really is about is starting to be viewed as a thought leader in your space. And this is like something that takes a lot of investment and time and developing a repeated content strategy, and you can't just expect to throw something out there and hope it hits and you acquire a bunch of users. So it's not a quick kind of hit of user acquisition in terms of direct marketing, but it can be very powerful there in addition to being viewed as a brand marketing exercise.
Well, I think that's important what you just said, in addition to, because there's very few things you can do where it's building your brand and thought leadership simultaneously while giving you the potential for customer acquisition. I mean, those are two things that don't usually happen in tandem, but infographics allow them to kind of both coexist. And that is why I think they're unique in their power to help us start about. What are some examples maybe of companies that have used infographics really well that you know of, maybe on your platform or maybe just any time in history, to help us get our head around the potential here?
Sure, yeah. So going back in time, the founders of Visually, we all came from a startup called Mint.com. And so we were in the marketing team there, and we started using infographics as a marketing tool for the Mint product. This was back in kind of 2007, 2008 era, when it was a relatively newfangled kind of technique. And so,
Yeah.
we had some success just based on the fact that it was new. People were really excited about it. But then, we got really serious and started doubling down on it when we saw that it was actually driving a lot of success in terms of acquisition for the Mint product. So I think at the peak, we were generating tens of thousands of new signups directly to the Mint product just through our content marketing and through the use of infographics for Mint. So that's where we kind of really had that aha moment where, wow, this really works. For this product. It could work for other products as well.
Yeah. Let's walk through the mechanics of kind of creating a great visualization, a great infographic, because maybe people watching this, they're going to create their own. Maybe they already have an in-house team and this can help them. Or they're going to hear this list and realize it's kind of hard and they're going to come to you and have you guys create one for them. But either way, it'll be a good value add for them. One of the first things that I've seen you mention online is you have to select a good topic. I think you already gave us an example of that. What's the probability that I would be here the way I am? That's a good topic. What makes a good topic? How do you know when there's a good one or a bad one?
Yeah, so I mean, a good topic, that's hard. The one kind of hack there that I've learned is that you don't have to come up with the topic from scratch. Like, odds are that there's some story out there, like the what are the odds case. Someone had already kind of done the research and figured it out. This is kind of a shortcut, but it works a lot of times. And we created another graphic that was not quite as successful, but did really well. It was called The Tale of Two Cows. And this is about different economies being visualized, or not visualized. We put it into a visualization or an infographic, but it was really just an old joke from the 50s. And so coming up with a good topic, you don't have to look too far sometimes. There's a lot of easy ways to find existing topics that people are interested in, and then turning that into an infographic is kind of all, Um,
Yeah. So sometimes an infographic is just a new way to consume old ideas,
yeah,
but
it
they'll
can
still be popular because the world has already vetted them as worthwhile ideas.
exactly because coming up with that really new idea that is going to resonate with people, that's really the hardest part. You can spend a lot of time trying to get that right, and then it'll still flop. Of course, it's sort of worth trying if you have a particular new idea that you want to try to get across.
Sure.
You just don't want to recycle old ideas, but
Yeah, but there's a lot of old ideas that are good and not popular.
exactly.
In that they found a niche somewhere, but most people on the internet haven't heard of it. So, the two cows thing, it's a joke from the 50s. How many people that saw the infographic knew the joke from the 50s? Some small percentage probably.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And then people, they see that and then they have ideas for they're like, oh, well, what about for my country? And then they start contributing. So it's like gets them excited.
Absolutely. And then after kind of finding the right topic is finding the right data. You said you did a Google search and you happened to find this professor who had done the math. Is that really the next step? Like go and try to find somebody that's already compiled the data if possible?
If possible, yeah. I mean, you might need to if it's something you're using your own internal company data for, then you'll have access to that. But getting the data right is really critical. We're pretty serious about our kind of level of data and data journalism and visually. So we have a number of trained journalists in the marketplace that will work on this component of infographics. A lot of times people think great infographics, they're just a designer kind of plotting away on in Photoshop, but a lot of the upfront work being done needs to be done by someone who's a trained researcher or journalist in order to get the facts right, and start laying out the story. So we have an editorial team, editorial director who's vetting all of these journalists that are working on projects. So I can assure you they're not sourcing Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's good. And so they find the right data, and I guess you probably already answered this. They analyze the data. So is that what these journalists are doing? They're analyzing, making sure that it holds up.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And the one thing there that is often overlooked is a lot of times people will come into creating an infographic with a particular idea of what the story is going to be, and we try to caution against that. Like you can keep that in the back of your head, but it's also important to kind of be open into exploring the data set. So if you're analyzing the data that you thought was going to tell one story, but it turns out to tell something else, that's fine. It could be an equally or even more interesting story. So it's important to keep an open mind when you're jumping into that.
Yeah, I can imagine becoming frustrated if there's a certain story I'm just dying to tell, but I
Yeah.
can't get the numbers to back it up. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's some internal conflict there with people as you try to reconcile those two worlds.
Def-
And so after you've built the narrative, you have to come up with a design concept. So how does that happen from narrative to design concept? What does that look like?
Sure. So I mean that's the design process. That's where kind of the designers start working, and they'll come up with some sketches, rough drafts for the story. It's kind of like a storyboard where it's just a series of charts or key points that they're gonna use, kind of wireframe together, and then going from that to more of the full-fledged kind of polish in Photoshop.
Yeah, and what makes for a great design? It seems like a lot of the infographics have similar elements. They seem very flat in a good way, very digestible. Things are appropriately highlighted. I mean, are those some of the criteria that really go into great infographics?
Yeah, those are definitely a few. Those highlights. I think there's a few key things. Like one is comparison of numbers, so showing this month versus last month as a trivial example. Like they're making comparisons between disparate data sets or similar data sets even can be a really good visual cue. Use of metaphor, the use of iconography in order to try to really crystallize or ram home the message for the viewer. So not just having a regular bar chart, but having a bar chart that's in the form of whatever the topic is, or having around that element some other iconography can really help drive home your point. And then just having unique kind of chart types or things that you wouldn't be able to see in just Excel or any regular charting library can really help quite a bit.
Yeah, those are great insights. And so then they polish and refine it, which my guess is them just being in Photoshop, making it awesome.
Yeah.
And then you have the hardest part, really, which is distribution. A lot of people can design. Distribution is always hard. So
Yeah.
I think we already know the answer, but what do you guys do there?
Yeah, I mean, we're focused on distribution. That's like it's a key part of what we offer customers because no one's creating an infographic to get it not seen unless unless they're doing it with private internal data and it's for the bots.
Which is rare.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's surprising actually. I mean, we could talk about this later, but there's a lot of what we're seeing is a lot of trends from external use of infographics to moving more inside the enterprise. So people
Really?
are getting like reports that are getting generated in infographic form. So that's something
Yeah.
we're kind of dabbling in right
A
now.
lot of people trying to keep their jobs, so they're making the reports look super awesome now.
Yep. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, this will blow away our boring meeting if I show them this.
yeah, exactly.
That's cool. But no, those are great insights around all those things. And so infographics, I mean, just for people, listening and watching, it might be something worth trying. We had Rand Fishkin on recently talk about inbound marketing. Infographics is a piece of that equation. Infographics can be a really important piece of inbound marketing tactics. But let's change gears a little bit because you're involved in some other things, just growth related, that aren't necessarily about infographics. Before coming to Visually, like you said, you worked at Mint, and then after that, I believe you also worked at a coupon site that you created. And so you have some experiences before Visually, and one of the skill sets you picked up was pay-per-click advertising. And so I just want to ask you kind of, what are some of the strategies that you learned pre-Visually about pay-per-click and the way you kind of go about it? And I see over your shoulder there the long tail of something, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but you can tell us.
Yeah, this like that graph might be hard to make out. It's basically, I was explaining to someone the other day who's over here, showing them kind of the long tail of search when it comes to paid search, and it's similar to the concept with organic search. Is that there's 10% of in the kind of fat head of the tail. There's your 10% of keywords that are doing 10% of the volume of overall search, but then there's that 90% in the tail that is in pay-per-click terms where you really want to focus. There's less competition, there's more intent usually, so these are keywords that are usually over 3 words or more, so they're really descriptive of the intent of the browser or the visitor. And so figuring out strategies, and it's probably a whole nother episode to get into, but
Yeah. Well, we might have to have you on again just to do a deep dive into that at some point.
yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
But I think the takeaways in a nutshell are just that you can get from pay-per-click as kind of a training ground for other types of growth techniques or growth marketing is figuring out intent is really key. So intent coming from a keyword is probably about the purest form of intent you can get. So trying to align your ad copy with your landing page with the keyword that's actually being searched for and making sure those mesh 100%. It's a hard thing to do at scale when you're talking about 5, 10, hundreds of thousands of keywords. Getting those all aligned perfectly is a big challenge.
Yeah. So you're really using pay-per-click as almost customer research so that you can build it back into your copywriting, design, what words they want to see and hear, whatever, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can use it, it's great for direct customer acquisition, but then, you can also use it as kind of a flypaper for figuring out like new things that people are looking for, new demand maybe that you haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Now let me ask you one question about the long tail of search. You might be able to help me out a little bit here. As I go in there, I agree. Like I want to go after the long tail. So when I'm looking at testing the waters with pay-per-click on Google, let's say for Growth Hacker TV, I go in there, and when I go short tail, the cost per click is way high, and I'm not going to spend that right now because our organic traffic's so good. So then I go into the long tail, and it says there's not enough traffic for those keywords or those phrases. And yet they still will run ads on them at the same time, even though they're telling me there's not enough traffic. So do I need to ignore their warnings, or what do you do there?
Yeah, pretty much. They're probably lying to you. So I mean, the reality is like the individual search traffic is going to be really low. So when they say it's less than 10 searches per month, that might be true, but in aggregate, all of those put together is going to be much more than the the amount of volume in the top of the funnel.
Yeah.
One other thing that is you can kind of apply to other growth techniques from paid search is being able to forecast the ceilings and the potential volume of a particular channel.
Yeah.
So it's really quantifiable in paid search because you have those tools like the keyword estimator that Google provides. You can see, oh, well, there's only 10,000 people searching this per month, so if we get a fraction of that, it's not really going to move the needle. And what I think is often overlooked in other kind of channel exploration is trying to forecast that potential ceiling or volume up front before you really dive into it. So if you're looking at email as a channel and you're seeing that, oh, you do some back of the envelope math and we're not going to be able to scale this beyond a certain level, then it might not be worth putting that time in up front. So kind of doing that homework and pre-work in order to figure out the scalability of a channel is something that I learned from paid search.
Yeah, and so if you're going to do a long tail strategy, you really need a lot of long tail keywords to add up to something meaningful, or you're wasting your time if you're going after a couple phrases, right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
That's cool. Now, you also write a blog, and on the blog you have different blog posts about different growth concepts from time to time, and a few of them caught my attention, so I want to ask you about them real quick here. One of them is you talked about the difference, in perception of how companies grow versus the reality of how companies grow. What do you mean by that when you say perception and reality there?
Yeah, so it's funny. I mean, you often see in the press a certain story gets written about a company, and it's talking about the collaborative economy, or it's there's some buzzword getting thrown around.
Sure.
About
Uber.
Yeah, exactly. And the oftentimes, if you look under the covers, the reality is somewhat different than the perception. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for the company. Like they want to perpetuate this idea that the ride sharing economy is really big, or in Airbnb's case that home sharing is kind of happening and people are having you over and cooking you eggs for breakfast. But in reality, probably it's more professional landlords and people who are kind of they were using something else before, and now they're just using Airbnb as a new distribution channel. So
yeah,
that's kind of what I meant by the perception versus reality.
No, that's great. And I mean, until you're on the inside of a startup, you just don't know. And I think that's good for a couple reasons. One, you mentioned, you get to kind of hide what's really working sometimes if you want to, and just let people assume whatever. But on the flip side, don't take the bait if you're on the outside looking in. Don't assume that, I can replicate their playbook. You may not even know their playbook. You may know the blog post that acts like they know their playbook, but you don't know their playbook. And so you really have to just think about your own startup, think about your own KPIs, think about your own methods for moving things forward and up and to the right, and then somebody else can write incorrectly about how you're growing. Right?
Yeah, pretty much. That's the lesson.
Yeah, that's cool. Another blog post you had, you mentioned that with A/B testing, there's no free lunch. What do you mean by that? That with A/B testing, there's no free lunch?
Yeah, so free lunch in economics. Like, I'm an economics geek, so that was kind of me putting in my economics spin. And it really what I meant by that is just that when you're doing an A/B test, what most people do, they'll create an alternate version of the landing page. Maybe they're testing a particular button color, maybe they're testing a new image, maybe they're testing a lot of these things at once. And typically when you set these up, you're optimizing around probably one conversion event, one variable. Do we get more people clicking this forum, or more people signing up for our site, things like that. What I think that kind of gets lost in that sometimes is the unintended consequences of optimizing for a single variable. So if you have other conversion events that might be interesting, or other metrics that you're trying to optimize for that might be impacted by you trying to optimize for this one event, you don't really have the full picture. That's what you actually did, and you may have not even kind of moved the needle much, because you tweaked out this conversion event, but then it was a sacrifice. It was kind of sacrificing, maybe the user experience was being sacrificed. So that's kind of what I meant there, is be careful of the unintended consequences of split. Keep split testing your sites.
Yeah, it makes me think about like the movie Back to the Future. Like, you change one thing and you think you changed one thing, but you actually changed 10, and it's hard to know what variables are actually interacting with each other now.
Yeah.
Or it makes me think about like the
better than free lunch. I like that for the
there you go.
better title.
Or even the the experiments in quantum physics, where it's like just by virtue of there being somebody observing the experiment is different. It's like, how do you control for that? Like, what does a control group look like when observing it changes it? And so at a deep level, yeah, A/B testing is just not that simple sometimes.
It's really not, and you can throw up your hands and say I'm not going to worry about it, or you can kind of get serious about it, or somewhere in between, and just recognize that there could be some fallibility in your experiment and just live with it.
Yeah. Now, another blog post I want to ask you about, the last one here, is you talk about the differences in learning from success and learning from failure, and I loved when I saw this blog post because I've always held that you can learn from both, and I still believe that you can learn from success and failure. But this clarified my thinking even more. So how do you see the difference between learning from success and learning from failure?
So I think kind of, for me, learning from failures is overrated. I think, some people in our industry, they try to glorify failure. You hear the term fail fast.
Uh-huh.
I think the assumption there is that getting your failures out of the way is going to get you closer to success. And I don't really believe that to be true. So I think that if you have something and you figured out something that's maybe kind of working, that's a good place to start, and just start really trying to get from something kind of working to really working. That's a much better use of your time than trying to say, oh, well, maybe this is kind of working, but let's try like 5 other things to see if any of those will just take off. The reality is, like, nothing's going to really work, especially when it comes to growth. Like, most companies, they have 1 or 2 channels which are far and away the most successful channels for their growth. And figuring out what those 1 and 2 are going to be is probably the most important thing we can be doing.
Yeah, and see, that's what helped clarify it for me, is that there's a million ways to fail. There's only a couple ways to succeed. So finding a few of the ways that failure is possible doesn't actually help that much. It's not a net negative, but it doesn't help that much in comparison. But finding the few ways that'll actually work, that is a huge win, because now you can drive growth through the roof. And so that, like I said, it helped my thinking. Even though I still agree you can learn from both, you do learn from success more.
Yeah, definitely.
No,
and
that's
then
great.
replicate those successes,
Yeah, you can't replicate failure. You can just move on and don't fail that way again. But you can't build upon it. It's not forward momentum. It's not a flywheel. It's just cross that one off. We know that doesn't work.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, this has been an awesome interview, Adam. Just a couple, high-level final questions here. One, what's the best growth hack you've ever seen implemented? Maybe you did it yourself. Maybe you saw it somewhere else. Just something that caught your attention. Like, yeah, that's cool.
Okay, yeah. I mean, one that I saw actually from another startup they'd implemented, and we started using it ourselves. It was pretty cool. It was they went out, they gathered up a bunch of their customer objections, or potential customer objections, like, oh, it's too much money, it's not going to work with this software. In our case, it was, I have an in-house design team, why would I need to use a service like Visually? Mm-hmm. And so we gathered up all of our best existing customers. We posted this as an open question on Quora, and then had all of our existing customers write, who liked our service, put out their answers publicly on Quora. Uh-huh. And then that got us a lot of views, and then we continued to use that link in all of our email signatures. So if you see an email from me, you've probably seen my email signature. Why would I use the Visually Marketplace instead of use my in-house team? So it kind of perpetuates through for each new prospective customer.
So it's like you're using social proof to answer objections, because if someone that uses a service tells them why those aren't really objections, it's so much more powerful than an internal person copywriting it to death and making it sound exactly the way that the legalese needs it to sound. So I like that a lot. That's a great idea there. And then last question here: what's the best advice that you have for any startup that's trying to grow?
So what I said before: focus on the kind of core. First and foremost, before you even worry about trying to grow, figure out what is the core value of your product and how it's being provided, and just obsess with getting that right. That's, before you worry about anything else, that should be your number one kind of kind of directive. Once you think you've figured that out, or you're on your way to figuring that out, then figure out what are those one or two channels that are going to grow, whether it's email, whether it's paid search, whether it's social media. Failing fast is, obviously I'm not a fan of that, but once you have something that's working, really start trying to figure out how to make it 10x better and just focus on getting that right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Adam, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for coming on Growth Hacker TV.
No problem. I loved it.